Yes, guys, welcome back to another video. As promised, we're going to be diving into my draft rankings in this video. It's not going to be a mock draft. It's not going to be a phantom draft. This is all about my subjective opinion in ranking this, largely this entire pool, albeit this is going to be a top 30 ranking, but we're going to get through a lot of players. I'm not going to go into each player really in depth in this video just because it'll take too long to get through everything. This was a really difficult video to make. You're starting to get into cross-positional areas. You've got key position players, you've got defenders, you've got forwards, you've got midfielders, all of that kind of stuff, and you have to try to make a ranking. I haven't used the matrix or anything like that I did for certain positions on the ground, so lots of things come into how I've made these decisions, but at the end of the day, it really is just that gun to the head. Who would you take out of player A versus player B if you had to? And that's largely what a recruiter has to do on draft night. They get that 2 minutes. They have to make a selection. They have to have lists drawn up of, scenario A, who would I take in this situation? And that's what I've tried to replicate here. Unlike some of these draft rankings, mine isn't going to be based on form at all. I'm not going to say player A is better than player B because he got his average 30 disposals during this game. This is all going to be about projecting the entire package of the footballer and what we think that they can become in 3, 4, 5 years. Albeit if you do win the ball consistently, it probably means you're doing that because of some traits that you have, like your running ability or the way that you prepare or get ready for a game and your position and those sorts of things. So it does come into it a little bit. But as such, I'm not ranking on performance. I'm ranking on what I think they can be. So coming in at number 1 on my list is FinnO'Sullivan. He's a 182 centimetre midfielder, but he can play in the forward half of the ground. As I said, I'm not going to go through too much in these little, bios on the players, but basically to say the reason that I take FinnO'Sullivan as the number 1 player is that, versatility that he has, the roundedness to his game. There's not really anything that he's bad at. Athletically, he's brilliant. As opposed to a lot of the other mids in this draft, I feel FinnO'Sullivan has that a little bit more of a hybrid profile in the sense that he is not just an endurance athlete that accumulates the ball, but he has real explosiveness and real dynamism in his game, that speed side of his game that is really penetrative and really important to be able to break the game open in a top-level game. So he's a fairly easy decision for me in the end, and I've watched this guy for a long time. I really rate him. I know some people are worried about the productivity, but that doesn't bother me as much that he's getting, between 15 and 25 touches at under 18 level. I like the damage and the projection that he poses. Number 2, these two players could have been teammates. They're both from that same GWV area, albeit FinnO'Sullivan played for Oakley in the Coates Talent League. Sam Lawler is a 187 centimetre, predominantly a midfield, and I think clubs will be drafting him as a midfielder. But again, that flexibility, the versatility to be able to roll forward, take a big grab in a big moment in a game. We're in the midst of finals here, and I think you can kind of see the types of players that really thrive in the big moments. There are different types of players, of course, but some of these guys that have that power, strength, and explosiveness that Sam Lawler has to be able to, again, break the game open. I just think this guy, and this is what I'm talking about with this video, gun to my head, could I take someone like a Levi Ashcroft, for example? I could take him, but then somebody else gets Sam Lawler, and I don't want to live in that world. 187 centimetres, you can deploy him as a big-bodied mid and just to be a strong physical presence at the contest. This guy absolutely loves body contact. He actually thrives off it. His defensive pressure is brilliant, which is super important and something we don't probably talk about enough in the drafting situation. It's all with the ball stuff. Lawler's great as a physical presence and enforcer in the midfield, and then he drifts forward and he's so penetrative and punishing. He can kick outside 50 goals. He can take you marks. He can play all over the ground because of that physicality. And I think he's dropped down the ranks due to, injuries that he's had this season, the big hamstring that he has now. And that does tend to be a little bit more of a risk with this type of player, that explosive athlete. They do tend to pick up more injuries, but he just, he strikes me as the kind of character that's just going to thrive at the top level. And I'd be probably happy to take this guy at 1, honestly. And I'm rapt to be able to take him at 2. Number 3 on my list is Harvey Langford, another big-bodied mid, so fitting that theme along the lines of Sam Lawler, albeit they're very different players. Langford, more of an endurance athlete. He's not particularly, hasn't got that velocity and that power of Sam Lawler, but he definitely has the strength. He's really physical around the ball. He's another one that loves body contact, loves to use the fend off, albeit it's not the speed and power that he really possesses. He more covers the ground in a Bontempelli-esque way, I would suppose. I love the fact that you can deploy this guy as a forward and a midfielder, and he acts as that bigger body around the contest. But he's also got some really nice soft skills to go with that as well. He's got a beautiful left foot kick, and he's got some really nice tidy skills in around the contest. He can do some really nice releasing handballs to get some of those quicker, speedier, more explosive players on the outside as well. So I just think if you're picking this guy between him and a 180 centimetre midfielder, he just has a few more little extras that cover you from an insurance point of view, I suppose. 4 was a really tough call for me, but I went with the South Australian Sid Draper. I love the agility. I love the explosiveness that he has away from that centre circle. I don't love his kicking. The more that I've watched that in recent times, I saw some of his national championships and I really did like the kicking, but I've probably been a little bit less impressed, let's say, at the top level or at the SANFL level that he's been playing at. But the agility, the ball handling skills, the quick hands out of contest, and then the ability to be able to drive with his legs and get forward as well. And even, at times kick a goal from forward half stoppages. Really, really impressive. And just one at this point, I think projects a little bit better than any of those more endurance-based accumulator type mids that we've got in this draft. Number 5 on the list probably feels a little bit harsh given the form that he's had. And I mentioned that off the top with the form versus the projection thing. It's Jagger Smith, the 181 centimetre midfielder from the Oakley Chargers. He's one of the most, skillful, evasive, smaller-bodied mids in this draft. He doesn't hit the scoreboard as much as some of those other guys. He's not as physical around the contest, and when you're at the AFL level, and sometimes you just need to mix up your midfield a little bit, you need to get some different guys through there. I just think there's less flexibility with what you can do with this guy. If the midfield mix is not working for whatever reason with the mix of players that you've got in there, I don't think there's much that you can do with Jagger, and that kind of worries me a little bit and why I've gone with those Sam Lawler, Harvey Langford types ahead of him. But he's a great player, he's a super skillful player, and he's had a wonderful season, so you'd be pretty wrapped with him as, a top 5 pick. And I think when it comes down to the mocks, it's going to be all about the balance of what you're trying to do with your midfield. Number 6 is Murphy Reid, another 180 centimetre, kind of smaller bodied midfielder, but one that has elite skills, elite movement, and elite handballing skills when he's on the inside of the contest. He can release teammates unbelievably with that 360-degree handballing that he does. And then he really, floats into pockets of space, runs to really smart areas to be able to be used in the transition, and he can hit the scoreboard as well when he goes forward. He's just such a smart player. Think Jack Sinclair, think Harry Sheasel, those types that have really good lateral movement, but probably don't have the raw speed of some of those more powerful type midfielders. I just think his skill level, he can't really go much lower than this. And again, it's that gun to the head thing, and I can't let this guy fall any lower than 6. I really like that he's a big game player too. He's had big performances across the national championships when it mattered, and in last year's grand final, he was exceptional as well. So easy pick there at 6. And then I've got Levi Ashcroft as a 7th ranked midfielder. And again, Ashcroft's football smarts are probably, equal to Murphy Reid, equal to the best players in this draft. Again, the only reason that I've personally marked him down is just that ultimate damage factor with a number 1 pick. I think his type, Levi Ashcroft, is that just sort of, accumulating midfielder, albeit one that does it in a really articulate, a really skillful way. Like, look what his brother's doing in the finals. I think that's, something that you could expect from Levi when he does hit the AFL as well. But just some of those other players like a Sam Lawler, like a Harvey Langford, they're just a little bit harder to come by. And I think players more similar to an Ashcroft can be found, within other drafts or maybe even later in the drafts. You can get the same, at least, type of player to try to build your list around. So I've dropped him down for that reason. I think he's likely one of the players that will have the biggest impact when he comes in his first couple of years. But, maybe some other players will overtake him in 3-4 years' time. So very happy with him at 7. And that brings us to Josh Smiley, who's definitely slid in my rankings a little bit. And it's probably, again, when we talk about that flexibility and the ability to be able to play in different areas of the ground and still have an impact. And that's my one question mark about Josh Smiley. When he does go forward to try to use that size that he has, like you want what a Bontempelli does, what a Cripps does. And I just don't really see it from Josh Smiley when he purely goes forward. I think he's great as a big-bodied midfielder, akin to a Tom Green, but I'm not sure how much he's going to hit the scoreboard with the way that he uses his body in the forward half of the ground, and that's why he slid for me. I think as just a pure big-bodied midfielder, he's still a really great option, and that's why I've still got him at pick 8, which is, really good. But I think in another draft, maybe last year's draft or next year's draft, he might have ended up going, top 3, top 4. But in this one, it's just with the quality at the top end, he's just slid a little bit in my rankings. Number 9 is the Gold Coast Academy product, Leo Lombard. I think he's probably being slept on a little bit just from the fact that he is tied to the Gold Coast. So you stop talking about him and you're like, yeah, okay, he's there. But I go back to that national championships, which is a big part of this picture. And some of the football that he was playing and the attributes that he has, he's a smaller bodied, as in a shorter midfielder. Which you go, okay, yeah, not that keen on that. But he's really a small forward / midfielder as well. And we've seen the rise of that player come in the AFL in importance. Leo Lombard's very explosive. He's a tackle breaker. He's a tackler. So he's got that two-way part to his game. He's a really good endurance athlete as well. So a bit of a hybrid athlete and someone that could, he could be a top 4 player. When he hits the AFL, I think he's going to have an immediate impact as well. We've seen that at the VFL level. But yeah, I just think he's being slept on a little bit. I've got him at 9, which is, I think he could even be higher than that, really. I feel like I'm talking way too much in this. I'm going to have to try to rush through these a little bit faster. At 10, I've got the first key position player coming up. So this was the point where I'm like, I've got to get this guy in there. It's Alex Tyrou. I did the video about him the other week. Such a good athlete. I also have just kind of followed his season and I love the trajectory that he's on and how quickly he's improving. I think that's a really big deal for how you look at, young guys when they are developing and coming through. If you can see that, development come on really fast and particularly when they're in a more elite environment, that's important. He's a key position defender, as we know, low 190s, which is probably, potentially a red flag. You think, I want more of like someone closer to 200 centimeters, but this guy's so good in the air. His athleticism is so good. His vertical jumping and, running vertical jumps and those kind of attributes. He's also got that power running in his game to be able to burst through a contest when he's got the ball in his hand. He also has that, fearless attitude towards the contest as well that we've seen. So just, would I prefer to take a key forward this high up in the draft? You might look at it that way, but I think you can get someone more likely in the forward half of the ground. You can just get a player that competes. I see Alex Tyrou, somebody that really is going to mark the ball for you, and the way that he reads the game, so important in the modern game to be able to win the ball back off the opposition at halfback. So I'm going to take Tyrou here at 10, and I'd be pretty rapt to get him at that number, to be honest. Number 11, I've got Toby Travalia, who, again, I've kind of flirted with him being a top 10 pick. I love flexibility, and you can probably see that from my top 10. I like the ability to be able to move a player around. They might have midfield attributes later down the track. I think he has that. I think the one serious weapon that this guy has that you'd love to just plug and play into your team is that running ability, that high intensity running. He looks like an 800-meter runner in some ways, and to be able to create those running overloads against the opposition with your list build, important, whether that's going to be in the midfield long term or at halfback. I guess I don't really know. He's got that ability in the air to be able to win the ball back off the opposition that I just talked about with Tyrou. And then all of those, just again, I look at the projection and the potential in this guy, and I just think it's Will Day-ish midfield. But then he could just be a great intercept, smaller, medium intercept defender that can mark the ball 187 centimeters. What a package Toby Travalia is. I'd probably take him just after the top 5. Again, I reckon if he was in a different draft, he'd be closer to, top 5, top 6, that sort of area. So 11. I can't seem to stop talking here, and I'm just talking for too long. Number 12, I've gone with Beau Allen. A ridiculous athlete, a big-bodied midfielder, 190 centimetres. He plays off half-back. He was actually just in the Peel Thunder premiership win as well. He got 11 touches in that game. I haven't watched the entire thing back to fully, comprehend his performance in that game, but I just think he's had a great season. He's got so much athleticism, so many traits. He's physical around the ball. He's got a beautiful left foot kick, not dissimilar to a Jordan Dawson. So similar to Langford in that sense, I like the entire package. I just haven't seen from him partly the consistency that I've seen from Langford, but he's a little bit less clean, I think, in and around the ball. Like Langford can really win some of those genuine, 50-50 balls in the midfield and flick out a beautiful handball, whereas Beau Allen at this point is just a little bit messier. But I could see him being one of the real, not bolters, I think he'll go around this range, but one that'll take a little bit longer to develop with that extra, height and athleticism, and he's not playing the football of a Langford just yet. So slipping to 12, but still, what a package he could be. 13, I've got Taj Houghton, who's been out of sight, out of mind with the ACL injury that he suffered really early in the season. I was lucky enough to watch, live some of his early games, and he reminds me a bit of something like a Shai Bolton, Isaac Rankin type player. He's got unbelievable agility, and not just that Jagger Smith kind of agility. He's got that real explosive, elastic agility where he's just bouncing around everywhere. I could see him having a Shai Bolton type career. Speed, agility, aerial ability when he drifts forward. He seems to have a really good endurance base. Again, we talk about that sort of hybrid athlete that's got the endurance side of their game and the power side of their game. I think Taj Houghton has that, and that's kind of made me probably rethink. I had him starting to slip a little bit closer to that 20 mark just because of his injury, and he will slip because of the injury. That's absolutely no doubt, but I think he's worth more. Again, I didn't want to not take him. It's the same. I've been using that analogy, the gun to the head thing, and I don't want another team to take him over me. So Taj Houghton at 13, which then brings me to 14, which is Joe Berry. I think the best small forward in this draft, a contest winner in the forward half of the ground. Again, he has that athletic ability of the speed, the endurance, the penetration, and the explosiveness that you really want from the modern day player. He's got the ability to break the game open, something like a Tom Papley in a little bit of a ways. A bit reminds me of Luke Bruce because he's a little bit rangier than a Papley. Then at 15, we've got the first key position forward. I've got Harry Armstrong. Really came down to him and Job Shanahan for that piece, but the grand final at the weekend just really reiterated how good Harry Armstrong is. He never gets beaten in a contest. Like, he's always able to at least bring the ball to ground. That's a starting point, but he pulls off some really ridiculous pack marks as well. So he's got that extra part to his game. He's a little bit Aaron Cadman, I think, in a lot of ways. He's got a really penetrative left kick as well. So, if he can mark the ball up on the wings, that endurance base that he has to get higher up the ground, and if he can get the ball around that 50 to 60 mark, he can be having a shot for goal, which is really important. Xavier Lindsay then comes in at 16 after Harry Armstrong, and he's probably comes in as the next batch of midfielders outside those sort of top 10 guys. Lindsay's got a really good endurance running base. He's got a nice booming left kick that he can use to sort of really a ball movement player, I would say. He does have an inside game to him, so you can throw him into the midfield and he can affect the contest in there. But I think, particularly early in his career, it's a wing, it's a half forward, it's maybe a half back role even for Lindsay. So it would be a ball movement player. And that probably just means that I couldn't put him up with those top level mids, but someone, again, that has a lot of upside because he can run at a high intensity for a long time and create those overloads, whether it's at half back again. So similar to what I mentioned with Toby Travalia. 17 then, and I've got the big slider here in Luke Traynor. This is really, really harsh because this is majorly because of the concussions that he suffered throughout the season. And if I was picking this purely on talent, he'd certainly be at least a top 12 pick for me. But yeah, the concussions, if you were, you're in a recruiter's shoes and you're saying, who do I not want to take the risk on? It's probably Luke Traynor with a top 10 pick at this moment. Number 18, I've got Isaac Kako, gun small forward, really damaging player, and another one that has that explosiveness to be able to break tackles and win contests in the forward half of the ground. He'll go to Essendon, so not much more we really need to talk about Kako. 19, I've got Jesse Detoli, and it really depends where this guy's going to play at the elite level. Playing midfield for the Northern Knights probably fits in as more of a forward half, small forward type player at the elite level. Just has an amazing goal sense, an amazing set of football smarts that he just uses brilliantly, whether it's, releasing an unbelievable handball where he gets a really low ground ball, picks it up, dishes out a handball. He's got that sort of 360-degree midfield traits really there. But then he's got power in his game and he's got athleticism. He's got a decent vertical jump on him. He's got power to be able to break tackles in the forward half of the ground. And yeah, he just finds a way, Jesse Detoli, and his form. And I said I wouldn't do it on form, but essentially I just think his football IQ is just too much to pass up on. And it's really getting to the point where how much I've seen that and how consistently I've seen him do it, he just has to be a top 20 pick. Rounding out the top 20 then is Jobe Shanahan as the number 2 key forward that I've got. It's really neck and neck with him and Harry Armstrong, I think, and 20 will be a steal for Jobe Shanahan, what he's been able to do at VFL level. Competes really well, and just one that, ends up kicking his 3 or 4 goals pretty much every game that you put him in. He'll take a little bit of time to develop, obviously, being a key forward, but I could see him having an impact in, year 2, year 3, that sort of thing. That's how highly I rate Jobe Shanahan. Pick 21, I've gone with Tom Gross here, and he's one that's a little bit hard for me to kind of predict what he's going to be. There's some elements of me that think that the way that he sort of, gets away from contest, I think a little bit of George Wardlaw vibes about him, but then I think maybe he's more of a endurance type Rory Sloane or Callum Ward type that's not as explosive. I end up going with 21. I just think he's that good a footballer. How he's been able to impact games, particularly in the big games and kick goals. Players that can, midfielders that can win clearance, win contests, be really clean with the ball and then drift forward and kick goals. Don't just grow on trees. And not every midfielder, even some of those guys in the top 10 struggle to do that. So I think Tom Gross has to be around that top 20 pick. He slides obviously a little bit because of the quality in the top half of this draft, but a great player. And then we go to 22, which is Sam Marshall, the winner of the best on ground in the grand final at the weekend. This guy is all about the overloads that I talked about with the running ability. He just keeps on running, this guy. He never stops, and he does it at a high intensity. And at least at Coates Talent League level, the guys just can't keep up with him. He's just consistently there for a handball receive on the outside. He will go in and win his own ball if he has to. At the Dragons, he doesn't really have to that often because either Ashcroft or Murphy Reed's doing it for him. I just think he's a brilliant footballer. And then having that amazing endurance base that can just burn off opposition teammates and just outnumber. This guy just creates outnumbers. He did it for the Allies in the national championships. Death by 1,000 cuts. I think people have sort of, labelled him, and it's not wrong. 23. I've gone with another big-bodied mid, playing in that team with Harvey Langford. I think Harvey Langford's got a few extra tricks. I think Cooper Hines at the top level, at 190 centimetres, I don't think he can really be that third tall type. I still think he's more of a big-bodied mid, which means he's probably going to have less things to hang his hat on at the end of the day, and that's why he slipped to 23 for me. I think he's a bit of a Patrick Cripps type, just the way that he uses his body, his physicality. He likes to tackle, he likes to burst through, and he does have that, not explosiveness, but he does, once he sort of gets up a bit of a head of steam, he does have a lot of power there and velocity that's sort of, going through and going to be able to break tackles really well with the strength that he has. Jack Whitlock at 24. I think there's a point where you can't take a risk on this type of player that you're just not 100% sure what he is. It's like, are you going to use him as a sort of floating winger? He's played a little bit at times behind the ball. I know he's at the end of the day, he's a key forward. He's a 200 centimetre athletic key forward. Probably hasn't shown the same amount of consistency and ceiling, I guess, as like a Jobe Shanahan or a Harry Armstrong as that key forward. So he's a little bit more speculative in that way. And in this draft with such quality, I think he slips to a 24. He's one of those project players that you sort of take a risk on and he could be anything at the end of the day. There's probably just at times with maybe Jack Whitlock where I just think he maybe just lacks that little bit of physicality that I can't put him up right with that top level of key forward. So 24, still an excellent high pick, and I think he's going to have a great career, Whitlock. Some of the things he did in that national championship's fantastic. 25, I've gone with Ollie Hannaford. I absolutely love this guy. He's aggressive, his attack on the ball, his tackling pressure. He loves getting in a scrap too and just putting pressure on the opposition. He always kicks goals. He always impacts. His grand final was absolutely amazing at the weekend. Small forward. around the high 170s mark is Ollie Hannaford. I haven't got the number there right with me, but just all impact, this guy. He's got great athleticism, great agility, explosive, damaging, all of those, buzzwords that you want to hear explain this guy. Really quick over 20 meters, and one that fits that profile of being that small forward that's really impacting the game in big ways. He wins those forward contests ahead of the ball and can roll through the midfield, so he has the versatility that I really like. And one that probably, national championships, this guy wasn't being talked about a lot, so he's been a big riser, and I've loved his back end of the year. Then at 26, I've got Christian Moraes, who was on a pure talent level, on a footballing level. I think this guy's really, really high level. He probably projects as a little bit more of a wing, half-forward type, and he's not as big of a contest winner as some of those more, low center of gravity players like a Jesse Detoli or an Ollie Hannaford. So from a contest point of view and a physicality point of view, it just drops him down a little bit, but has some traits, has some flexibility and versatility. Like his ability to go forward and take a mark has been really good, and the endurance base that he has means that he can float into spaces and become a real headache for teams. And he uses those good kicking skills and ability to kick a long-range goal. He's shown that throughout the season. So I can't see him dropping much lower than a 26 or, probably 30 is his max range. I could see him dropping before a team just goes, I've got to take this guy. I think he projects a little bit similar to like a Darcy Wilson. He's a little bit smaller, which probably marks him down as that wing player that can, take an overhead mark. He's probably not quite as athletic and tall as a Darcy Wilson. So 26 for him. Then at 27, I have another key forward here. This is, I think, the time that the key forwards are really start to kick into gear. I've gone with Jonty Fall here as a really power forward. I think Jonty Fall has become. I was really impressed with his grand final at the weekend in a day that, they weren't getting a lot of entries, and it was really difficult for him with the matchup that he had. Sandringham were putting a lot of physical work into him, and he was able to take some really, really big contested marks. He wasn't able to do that close to goal, but that was more about what was happening for GWV up the ground. He was competing, he was taking big marks, and just, the effort that he was putting in and how much it meant to him was really evident, I think, and he fought throughout the whole game. It was really impressive, and he's had a really impressive final series. So, he's pushing 196, 197. I think he's around that mark at the moment. He's more powerful than some of the other forwards. Probably, a little bit less athletic than a Jack Whitlock or someone like that, but someone that I think could have an impact really early on as well. Then I've got Cale Guerin, the Western Australian forward, at 28. He's an interesting one because he plays a lot more ruck in the Waffle Colts at the moment, but he can drift forward and be a real physical presence, and we saw that in the national championships. And I like the aggressiveness that this guy shows. I was watching a video the other day, and someone called him like a ruck Tex, I think it was, like ruck Tex Walker, which I found as a really interesting, because I think he does play, as a forward, I think he does play with the physicality of a Tex Walker, really good athleticism and just grunt and just a bit of mongrel in him, I suppose, that's, really good ahead of the ball to be able to get those contests and bring the smalls into the game. So 28 for Cale Guerin. Then I've got Matt Whitlock, brother of Jack, as the key position defender at 29. Again, a bit of a project player, and I think this is the area of the draft that teams will start to get a little bit speculative once those midfielders are sort of floated through and they've taken the best of the mids. The tall, more speculative picks will start to come in. Matt Whitlock will be that as that, really similar player to his brother, albeit that he's been deployed behind the ball a little bit more. Then at 30, so rounding out this entire, draft ranking that I've got the really highly talented basketball background player, of course, Alex Dodson, 204 centimeters, I think he is, really athletic, a ruck. I think a team can take this guy and sort of really build the midfield around him to be able to dominate the taps, to be able to dominate around the ground, having that sort of extra midfield type. He's probably less of a physical ruckman than someone like a Brodie Grundy or a Tristan Sherry or a Darcy, that type of ruck, more the athletic type that helps you on transition as well, but his height and athleticism allows him to, get up and dominate the taps, not dissimilar to someone like a Nick Naitanui did for West Coast, and that can really give you first use and first hands on the ball at stoppages as well. A few other notables there just to touch on quickly. I've got James Barrett really coming hard for this top 30 as an intercept defender. Lockie Jakes as a James Sicily-ish type, sort of smaller medium intercept defender. Harrison Oliver as a distributing halfback has just missed my list, as has the bigger-bodied medium forward midfielder in Hamish Davis from Western Australia as well. As I said, I've probably talked a little bit too much throughout. I've done this simply by process of elimination of who I would not want to miss out on, rather than, trying to rank them off form. I guess like a lot of the phantom form guides and stuff, it's more off, what they've done through this Coates Talent League season. I guess this is probably me. It's definitely me subjectively and just my opinions, but it's also just trying to project the best that I can. And I'm wanting to bring, athleticism into this a lot. I think athleticism is really important in the modern game of Australian rules football, more so than ever. You have to have footballing ability and athletic traits that can create those, problems and headaches for opposition teams if you're outrunning them or outpowering them in the contest. It's really, really important. So I won't talk for any longer because I've talked for too long. I'm sorry this one went for so long, and I'll try to get some more videos out. More phantoms coming into the draft. I'll try to release one more big phantom probably before the National Combine, and I'll have a lot more content coming out around the Combine. If you guys want, updates from what I've been doing with the Coates Talent League, there's plenty of stuff on Instagram to check out. Dylan Alexander follows draft there, and I'll see you guys next time.